The last thing I want to point out about this bullet list. Notice that each of the definitions is formatted exactly the same for the 4 barriers. The name of the inhibitor acts as the subject of a sentence, with the definition being the predicate of that sentence. For example, audience expectation subject, verb, result when the message that is sent differs. Competition barrier subject, verb, occur whenever. So you see the unit can be read as a sentence. That's only one way to organize this list. The important thing when you're organizing your list is to treat each definition the same grammatically. And let me show you what I mean by that. Here are some other student samples. Again, you see up here at the top in the first one, we have that subject-predicate type of format. The audience expectations, the name of the inhibitor, becomes the subject of the sentence, result when the message that is sent. Now, that is not the only type of pattern that you can use. Let's take a look here at student sample number 2. Here, it's also a bullet list, although different types of bullets are used. Notice also that the name of the inhibitor or barrier is somehow formatted. In this case, it is bold-faced. So everything looks pretty much the same. But now let's read one of these definitions. Personal inhibitors, : person not tolerating messages sent or received due to personal bias towards the audience sender or message. Notice how that is not a complete sentence. It's very much like the kind of definitions that you find in a dictionary. They are not complete sentences. The key thing is that same grammatical formatting is used in each of the definitions. There could be a third and even a fourth type pattern. For example, we could make each one of these definitions a complete sentence by writing personal inhibitors. The person does not tolerate messages sent or received due to personal bias. Perceptual inhibitors. The message is misunderstood due to. Nonverbal inhibitors. A person's body language suggests the sender lacks belief. So you see, there's even a third variety or way of organizing. The key is, once you choose a pattern, you must stick with it throughout the list in order for it to be parallel. Okay, let's go back to the paper we were reviewing. We're now ready to look at the third section of Barry's paper, which is the analysis section. And again, you see, as we pointed out in the directions, the analysis is done in the form of a table. On the left-hand side is the communication that was observed or participated in. In the middle is the name of the inhibitor or inhibitors at play. And on the right is the justification or the analysis of why that particular inhibitor was chosen to describe the breakdown in communication. Let's try this one. Here is the description or summary of the communication. My supervisor directed me to obtain the address of a voice-over IP phone. He told me how to obtain it since I was unfamiliar with the process. When I attempted the procedure and failed, I called my supervisor. He tried to tell the procedure to me over the phone, but the procedure still did not work. Upon his arrival, we attempted variations of the procedure without success. Okay, there is the attempt at communication between Barry and the supervisor. Barry identifies that this attempt at communication was inhibited by what he calls physical barriers. He's identified the inhibitor. And then over on the right, he justifies his selection of physical barrier by writing, when my supervisor initially described how to retrieve the address, we did not have a voice-over IP phone with us, preventing a hands-on demonstration. When I failed to retrieve the information and call my supervisor, he could not see the labels on the keys. Therefore, when he told me the names of the keys, they did not match the keys on the phone that I was working on. So clearly, the separation physical between Barry and the supervisor caused a breakdown in communication. And that's how the table works. Here is another communication observation. I called my supervisor to inform him of a situation, but he could not hear me because of a problem with his cell phone's reception. Again, he identifies that as a physical barrier, and he justifies it very quickly by writing, the lack of adequate reception prevented the communication from occurring. So that's how the table works. On the left-hand side is the summary of the communication attempt. In the middle is the identification of the barrier which prevented the communication from happening fully or successfully. And on the right is the justification of your selection of that barrier. And that leads us to the fourth part of Barry's paper and the last part, which is the evaluation. Again, notice the use of the subheading and how all subheadings have been the same. On a scale of 100, I give a grade of 85 to the communication effectiveness in my workplace. My associates and I generally communicate well, but the lack of reception for the cell phone's physical barrier often prevents attempts to pass information or to coordinate the efforts of personnel. We need better cell phones. Furthermore, IT needs to promote a better understanding among all members of the organization about what IT does, the problems that IT faces, and how the actions taken by IT benefit everyone, not just IT. So he is justifying the score that he gave by pointing out and generalizing about the problems that he sees there in the organization. Indeed, he writes, as for the organization as a whole, when people call IT concerning problems, the individuals say what they think they need instead of describing the failure's indications or the requirements that must be met. IT must then ask the appropriate questions to determine the information that is needed to provide the required support. This interface between customer and our IT service reps also needs to be streamlined and made less frustrating for both parties. So that was the evaluation portion of Barry's paper, and he did a good job with it. He gave the score of 85, then he justified that score with several paragraphs talking about the problems that he had identified. And he even went beyond that to talk about some potential solutions to those problems. Now that raises another good point, which is that this topic here in paper number 1 is a potentially very good topic for project number 4, the research-based argumentative report. You could easily see how Barry could do more research into the communication problems that IT customer support divisions face, and maybe even research into the solutions to those problems. What would a new customer interface look like? How much would those new cell phones cost? What brand would they be? But that's for later. For right now, you're focused on this, project number 1, the communication analysis. Now, if you have any question whatsoever about what is due, please don't hesitate to contact your professor or the Writing Center. And remember, you can always turn in your draft of any assignment, either partial draft or complete draft, and get feedback from the Writing Center in 48 hours or less. Okay, that said, I wish you the very best success on this project number 1, the communication analysis.